Hey, I am having to record this for class this Saturday because I'm going to be out of town. So I think it's actually more nerve-wracking to do this on camera so y'all can pick apart every little piece rather than be in front of you and actually presenting. So bear with me. My dissertation is on Pell Grant corruptibility, and all of my research started early thinking that I could do a quantitative analysis and get students to actually tell me the truth on a survey or a questionnaire of whether they defraud Pell Grant. And after sleepless nights and thinking about this over and over again, I decided that that wasn't going to happen. Students were not going to be honest with me on a survey or during an interview and actually tell me that they were stealing from the Department of Education. So I decided to take a different route and look into if anyone had done research on possible Pell Grant fraud, and so I started to find more resources that way. I have not been able to find anything about a researcher that has actually done interviews or surveys or questionnaires and found information that students are actually doing this. It's just not out there. This is new research. Pell Grant fraud has not been researched a lot. It's a fairly new topic, and so that's another reason why I'm having issues finding resources to do this. But anyway, the purpose of my study, and I basically took the outline that Dr. Craven had given us this past summer and took the dissertation manual and went down through there and basically outlined for you guys what I had done. The purpose of this study is to recognize the potential fraud by students and institutions. I have found cases where students and institutions alike have been indicted for Pell fraud. Congress is trying to crack down on the possibilities of institutions or students committing this. There were several cases that schools had students lie on applications, and of course students will lie on applications without institutions helping them. And so Congress, to combat that, has changed the application process, and it makes it less easy for students to lie. They also have to do, they have to file their tax returns. There were instances where students have even filed fraudulent tax returns in order to get this money. So it's a problem. It's just locating who is doing it and why they are doing it, obviously for reasons, for money reasons, but there's links missing in the research, and so the purpose of this is to find out who is doing it and how we can keep them from getting away with it. I built on previous research. The one main person that I pulled in the beginning was Eric Bettinger, and he had mentioned Pell fraud, and he was one of the first people to mention it, and he is from Ohio, and they had actually come up with paycheck Pell Grant, and what it is, well, I'll go into that in a little bit. The research that I've built on talks about attrition and retention, and talks about student demographics, which is also important to this research. Let me come back to that. The contribution to knowledge that I feel that this research will give is, number one, the taxpayers are paying way too much money into this system. Pell Grant is the most funded financial aid for the United States at $32.8 billion. That's B, billion. And the problem comes in is that for one institution that I talked with, students only have to go 60% of a semester. So if you have 18 weeks in a semester, they only have to go about 10 or 11 weeks before they get their refund. And at 60% of the time they get at that mark, they get their refund and then they leave school. And so therefore, not only are institutions, they get their tuition money, but they're losing the students. They're losing the graduation rates. They're losing the numbers that they are retaining in school. Students, that's the first thing, taxpayers are paying too much. The second thing is students who are abusing the system are not taking their education seriously. And this goes towards attendance and the grades not being there. You've got attendance that is lacking and the grades, the students are receiving Fs. Or if teachers are allowing them to withdraw. And then the third thing is exploitation of Pell by institutions and the students. There are several schemes going on that I hope to bring to light, and that is lying on applications, whether it's by the institution or by the student, lying on student aid reports, forging IRS documents, and creating straw students. There are cases, part of the legal discussion in my research is that there are cases involving, there was one that involved a prisoner, a female prisoner, and she had enrolled, she was apparently able to enroll for classes and receive Pell, but underneath, or they created a class, and under her guise, I guess, she was able to get the social security number, date of birth of other inmates and enroll them in the classes, and they got the money. And it is just unfathomable how people are getting this money and using it. And my research, that's my contribution to knowledge about education. My research questions were, is there a connection between financial aid reception and student attrition, which the grounded theory is, yes, there is a connection between the reception of the money and the attrition, because, for instance, one institution that I spoke with they have 96% of their students on Pell each semester. At the 60% mark, they lost 28% of those students because and there's a clear indication that once they get the check and all of that attendance is done for the 10 or 11 weeks that they're there, that they are leaving school. And so there is a connection. I just have to show that in my numbers of attrition. And here you have the attendance, here's where they get their money, and this is when they're leaving. You know, they're not attending classes, they're receiving Fs, and that's how I hope to show the importance of that there needs to be a new system. The second research question was, how do strategies allocating financial aid affect student retention and completion? Eric Bettinger, one of the researchers that started all of this, started talking about paycheck Pell. We're already paying students to go to school, basically. If you take a community college and their tuition is $1,200 a semester, which seems really cheap. Let's say it's $2,000 a semester. each student gets over $5,000. If you are a poor student, you can get more than $5,000. It's $5,550. What the institution does is it says, okay, here's the student, they're coming to school, they filled out all your paperwork, here's what they're taking, this is what they've registered for. The institution gets their tuition cost, and then the student is allotted $400 or $500 for books, depending on the institution. And then, so that's $2,500, let's say, if the student decides to go and get books. If the student does not decide to go and get books, then they don't have to worry about that. So let's say $2,500. Well, you have $3,000 plus out there that is standing. At that 60% mark, that's when that student will get their refund or their entitlement, and that is the $3,000 plus, depending on if they get their books or not. And here's where Bettinger said was critical. He said, we're already paying them to go to school, so why don't we break it down into paychecks? We get paid once a month, or twice a month, however you do it. Get paid once a month, and based on attendance and grades, don't give them that money at 60%. You give them money at the first 4 weeks, and then you go 8 weeks, and then you go 12 weeks. And then you go and you progress through that, and you give them, it's like a stipend, it's a paycheck. And based on their attendance and their grades, after the institution gets their tuition, and you put money aside for books, then that's left over, the $3,000 plus money, will go and be broken down into the 18-week period. And that is an incentive for these kids who might really want to go to school, but they get that $3,000 paycheck or that $3,000 refund, and they're like, well, you know, I was failing this class, or I had a D in this class, I wasn't doing that well this semester, so why don't I just go to the house? I think it would be an incentive and be wise for them, and wise for the Department of Education to look at this, to save some money. And if the student doesn't stay in school at that 60% mark, or if you see failing grades or attendance, then there should be some sort of repercussions. Yes, we'll pay you to come to school, but we want you to attend and we want you to pass. And I think this way we would see an increase in retention and an increase in graduation rates. Okay, my research is based upon a grounded theory that that students and institutions are defrauding Pell. The researchers before me have laid the groundwork, but there are missing links in the research, and I'm going to try to either, I don't know if fixing the problem seems like a big, seems like a big word. I don't know if I can fix the problem, but I think that through this research, I hope that I can maybe point us in the right direction of that there needs to be an overhaul, there needs to be changes. There was on that sheet that Dr. Craven gave us this summer, there was a literature search, and I had descriptors, and I've already named my descriptors as being retention, attrition, Pell Grant fraud, which really isn't, you know, if you Google Pell Grant fraud, you're going to come up with very little information. But I started earlier with student loan default, and that was another descriptor that I used. I later came in with legal cases involving students and institutions, And my preliminary sources for all of this was Victor Tinto and he's in the 80s, 1982 was when he wrote his big attrition. It was a book. And Bettinger, who did the Paycheck Pell. Desjardins and Goldrick Robb wrote about retention, and Goldrick Robb actually did a lot of information, or gave a lot of information on demographics. And I'm going to get back to that. I also found a lot of stuff from the United States Criminal Code and the cases involving the fraud, the institution fraud, and the student fraud. I think I've gotten out of order here. My research design is based upon a grounded theory, or based upon grounded theory, and I intend to take a constructivist position and expound upon the previous work. I believe that it is important to create a new system for refunding students, because the new system, I don't believe, is working. We're spending ungodly amounts of money on people who are abusing the system. And I think that it's not only critical for the future of higher education to expound on this. I'm not going to say fix, but it's also good for the needful students, the students who actually need the Pell. And because Congress is cutting back and making it harder, you're making it harder for everyone. And so the needful students, I went to school on Pell, and then I had student loans. But if it weren't for Pell in those first couple of years at the community college, I don't know where I would be today. I guess flipping burgers. I'm not quite sure. But it's also important, just not only for the needful students, but the institutions who, like Moorhead, Mississippi Delta Community College, they have got to have students on Pell. 96% of their students are on Pell. And it's not only good for those things, but the budgetary expense annually also. I always have a difficult time in relation to my research design. It talked about soundness and rigor, and I always have to just really remind myself what soundness and rigor mean. And so I titled my slide Trustworthiness and Accuracy. And I think that, and like everybody else's research that y'all are doing, this is going to be a daily, constant communication. Maybe not daily, but it's going to, whatever you're doing, whether you're doing quantitative or qualitative, I think that you, or us, or we, or whatever, that we've got to stay in constant communication with whoever we're working with, whether it be students or teachers or faculty members. I'm going to have to be in contact with my 5 community colleges that I've chosen for this study, with their computer services, with the financial aid office, and with the business office. So those 3 departments at 5 community colleges. And I think to add trustworthiness or soundness and rigor, there's just going to have to be a lot of documentation, a lot of note-taking, and almost like reports that have to be generated in order for me to give my research some backing and some meat, I guess is the best way to put it. Since I am doing qualitative, my sampling, it really involves all of the research, the prior research that's been done on this topic, or these descriptors, my variables, the attrition, the retention, and all of that stuff. But to add meet, again I'll say that word, to add kind of a depth to this, I found about 22 legal cases going back to the United States Code, and the cases involving institutions similar to community colleges, because all of this is based on community colleges, because they are the ones, those institutions are being taken advantage of more, or they see the attrition rate, a higher attrition rate at that 60% mark more than universities do. So my sampling is going to be all of the prior research that I found. I've got about 60 good references, 61, and that's not including the legal cases, the 22 legal cases that are going to be important to this research also. I've already given you my variables. I did mention earlier that pill fraud is something that has not been researched very heavily at all. It's going to be a task to do that. My methodology, I'm studying themes and patterns, and on that sheet that Dr. Craven, referencing that again, she had given us whether our research was going to be emic or etic, or I guess that's how you say it. And I am focusing on the emic perspective because I am focusing on a culture. And saying that, I'm being really careful. I think it was Mantra and Antoine that did their presentation last weekend about cultures, and being very careful not to point the finger at one culture over another. And in my research, I have discovered that there is one culture over others that is, or one group over others that is committing this fraud more often. And if any of y'all have information or just any kind of feedback that you can give me on how to handle this, it'd be much appreciated, because I don't want to step on toes, I don't want to offend anybody, but that is what I'm running into. Goldrick Robb, the girl who has done research on this, that has done all of the demographic research, or done a lot of demographic research on who is leaving school at certain times, has given me some tips also on how to word stuff. But if y'all think of anything, just holler at me. So that's my methodology. My data analysis procedure is going to be interpretational. I'm using all of the past research and what I gather from the institutions, and interpreting it, and through all of my records that I take, my notes and all of that stuff, I will come up with my findings. So, and that is it. I did have, in my introduction, I do have a couple of definitions that I don't know if I'm supposed to give those here or not, but there were two terms that really aren't used that often, and it's stop out or stayed out. And that is two indicators of, because sometimes you have students that will just stop out, and that means that they leave at that 60% mark once they get that check, but the next semester they will enroll, and so that student has just stayed out for the remainder of that first semester. It will indicate to the Department of Education that they did not complete that first semester, and so the second semester, their social security number and their date of birth and their name will be watched. And if that second semester they do it again, then they're red flagged, and that is one thing that Congress has come up with, that the students will be red flagged and that they will not be able to gain Pell the following semester. So if you took a fall semester, like we're in, and they stop out at that 60% mark, then in January they re-enroll and they stop out again, then they're red flagged. And so when it comes fall of 2013, say, and they try to re-enroll, they say, you know, you've done this, and you've done this for 2 consecutive semesters, and we're not allowing you to get Pell. In other words, they won't be eligible for Pell. And I think that's a good thing. So stopped out is when they just leave during the semester. Stayed out is when they'll stay out of school for several years, and then they will re-enroll in another institution or the same institution. And then I think what community colleges are finding is that those students stay out after the second semester because they know that they can't re-enroll, and therefore they might even be going to another institution, and they can do it another 2 semesters. And there is some money to be made, but what's it worth to them, and what's it worth to us? And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.